All right. Good morning, everybody. We are here with a special treat. We have Paul Rosenberg joining us today. Paul is an OG in the cryptography space. He's an author, he's a philosopher, he's a maker. In short, he's a Renaissance man, and we're very lucky to have him here today. Last time he was here, the topic of conversation was his latest newsletter, which was entitled "The Ethics of Rebellion." Now that podcast we did, it was podcast number 63 for us. It was recorded in the morning of January 6th. And if you guys are paying attention to dates at all, you probably remember what happened a couple hours after that. We had our own little pseudo rebellion, at least that's the way it was labeled, on the Capitol's steps and inside the Capitol. So Paul, may not be as momentous this time, let's hope, I guess what's covered today, but glad to have you back. Thank you.
Oh, always a pleasure. Thank you.
So today I wanted to talk to you about something that's, I think it was like 4 years ago, you and I had a conversation where you said you were going to change what you were writing about a bit. You're going to focus more on certain elements, and the way you described it to me at the time, and I think you still call it this, is the parallel society. You were starting to make that conscious change, and I think maybe it was a year or so before that, maybe 2 years before that, you wrote this book, The Breaking Dawn, which you sent me a copy of. And by the way, if you ever want to get someone to read a book, send them a copy and write in front of something very, very nice to the person you're sending it to, and they will feel a deep sense of obligation to read it. I certainly did, and I'm glad I did read it because it was fantastic. But maybe you could tell us about the book, assuming you would connect this to parallel society, but maybe just, outline, what a parallel society means to you and why you wanted to shift your work more in that direction a few years ago.
Yeah, I think it's important to build parallel to the mainline culture, because the mainline culture just isn't going to be redeemed. There are many, many people in it who are good people, who are, mostly they're confused, or they're not sure, they're a little bit afraid to speak out, or whatever. They all have their own details. But we need a way around the mainline culture, because the mainline culture is ruled with fear. The mainline culture, the rulership, which is presently rulers and their friends in media and social media, control the mainline culture, and their whole model rests upon taking advantage of human weaknesses. We want to build a model that rests upon human virtues and human abilities. And we're just not going to get it. Fixing the mainline culture just isn't going to work. It's like being in Rome in 450, 460 AD. And there were a lot of Romans who, thought, we got to restore the old virtues. We have to bring them back. This councilman or whatever it is going to help us, and we're going to bring it back. But it just doesn't work. So you find out that pretty much all of the real significant forward progress in the world comes by parallel societies, by ways around the monolith that grow into something better on the other side. The term parallel society, most recently, comes from Eastern Europe during the Soviet occupation. There were parallel society groups in the Czech Republic and in Poland and in others. Let's see if I can say it right. Paralelny Polis was the way they often pronounced it. And it's just, you can find it all through human history. But it just works. It's the way things work, because once you get a large monolithic organization, it doesn't recover itself. It just breaks in one way or the other. And there's no point in wasting oceans of time and energy trying to fix this thing. If we want to actually make things better, we go around it. So that's why parallel society.
That's a really hard concept for people to grasp. I think the idea that, because they have a lot of emotional attachment, a lot of real world attachment to the existing culture that's dominant today. And a lot of people that we love are deeply committed to it and are not going to, necessarily be helpful or even encouraging in creating anything that's parallel to it. But how do you think people break away from that? Break away from that sense that it's just, you shouldn't fight this tide. It can't be fought. The tide can never be fought. How do you do that?
one of the interesting things is that people do it obviously when they're in pain. If the system hurts them badly enough, it spits them out, and they, become, usually they're a little bit angry and upset and go a little bit overboard in one way or another. Well, so be it. And they get out of it that way. The other way is when, to quote a line from John Galt, I told them they were right. And you get people who believe in the model of a healthy family, for God's sake, who believe in the right way for people to live is according to the golden rule. And you get people who are thinking about these things, say, yeah, you're right. And you know what else? We should apply it to all of life, not just what goes on inside your four walls of your home. We should apply the golden rule to everything. And if we do that, then the existing model just goes away, because government of all types rests upon one very clear statement, even though none of us like to say it very much, is their mode of operation is do what we say or we'll hurt you. That's it. People, all of the reactions people have to government, not all, 99% or whatever it is, are based upon, if I don't do what they say, bad things will happen to me. And that's a horrible model for human behavior. But that's what it is.
It does seem like there's been, maybe because of the really effective media, it seems pretty obvious right now that it's not just simple and direct coercion that's actually motivating people, but instead, people are this voluntary compliance for all of these ideas that really, limit individual freedom is shocking to me. I mean, Doug and I have talked about this a lot. It's amazing that people allowed their businesses to be destroyed, with barely a fight. I mean, barely a word, and people and kids' lives being destroyed by not being able to interact with other children at all, by being isolated and said to sit in front of a computer all day, and people just gone with it. So it's not even like they've had to come with the gun and said, this is what you must do. It's that they've become the enforcers, almost like, during the Cultural Revolution. It's, the government isn't even necessary because the Red Guard is taking care of it.
Well, there's a lot of truth in that. And one of the sad things is that there are a whole lot of people for whom lockdown has value, because to them, lockdown means you don't have to take the risk of living. You're sheltered in place. You're locking down. You don't have to live. You don't have to take risks anymore. There's virtue in whatever. That it's a clear virtue of wearing your mask in public, and whatever it is, and people find comfort in that. It's usually people who are a little disappointed with life, that aren't really don't feel that they're up to the challenge, whatever. They find refuge in it, emotional refuge in it. And I don't know what number of people there are like that, but there's quite a significant number.
I've seen a couple of examples of that myself and had the same feeling about it, that it's like they were saying they were very militant about rules. They didn't want to leave their house. The excuse was they didn't want to get their much older parents. They came back from school and they're living with their parents. So they didn't want their older parents to get sick. And this woman, her brother, was, she didn't want him coming to the house at all because he was out and interacting with the world. And she was committed to not doing anything until she was vaccinated. And this is a woman who is in her mid-20s. And it just seems like life is very difficult and scary and unpleasant, and things don't go right. And it seems like if you can have this excuse for why these things aren't going right for you, you just, where you could just not even confront them, it must give them some comfort. But boy, what a mistake that is, I think, to live that.
Yeah.
I mean, what a mistake.
Yeah. And there are others that just want to impose things upon others. Here's something Doug will I think remember. Doug used to run a great set of meetings, the Eris Society back in the olden days. And there was a guy.
I think they call it the before times now, Paul.
The before times. Well, Doug, you remember there was a guy there, big tall guy named Gene Jewett. And Gene got up and made a presentation. It was in 1999, I remember it. And he said, look, I can't exactly prove this, but I'm telling you, there's about 1 or 2% of the people who, if they could, would rule the world and force everybody to do their will. But there's another 12 or so percent who will not do that, but are glad to enforce orders underneath the 1 or 2%. And I think what the last year has shown that there's a lot of 1 or 2 percenters who are governors of major states, a lot of middle level political officials. The governor of Michigan leaps to mind, the governor of New York leaps to mind, who really dig the power and really like being able to make other people do things. And then there's the 10 or 12% who are the ones who will rat out their neighbors for not wearing their mask properly, or who follow you around in the grocery store and tell somebody if you're not wearing your mask and things like that. And these people have been empowered over the last year.
I think that those percentages, they're approximately right, but it's kind of Pareto's law, the 80-20 rule. So if you make the assumption that 80% of people are basically good and decent, that means that 20% are potential trouble sources, and 20% of that 20% are active sociopaths. So it's actually worse than you describe, I fear. And that's assuming that you think that 80% of people are actually good. I mean, you could say, if you're a cynic or a pessimist, you could say 80% of people are basically really trouble, and only 20% are, and only 4% are good. I hate to take that view of Pareto's law.
Well, I'm an optimist. I'll give you my great example of why. Most people, I think, are abused, are afraid, are confused, and really don't know what to do and feel overcome by the world. I talked about this last time when I was on. When I was a boy, we used to get tested in school every year or 2 years, whatever it was. Had this long battery of tests, a day or two of tests. And I always got really, really good scores on all of these things, but I felt stupid the whole time. And I think that the factory model of schooling, with a lot of the things that are built into it, makes children feel stupid. And it makes them feel overcome. I mean, children tend to feel that way anyway, looking at at a large, at a world that they don't understand, with people ordering them around, with lots of big, scary people wandering around, including older kids who are sometimes menacing on purpose. And it's easy for people to get into that kind of way of thinking, that vision of the world. But most people behave mostly okay most of the time. I like to use the example of driving down the street to work. You pass 1,000 cars, and 998, 999 of them will be fine. They've got their own little shtick going on, and they're, driving and thinking about whatever, but they drive reasonably well. But the one schmuck, the one guy who drives badly, him you remember, and you forget about the 998. So I think people are generally better than we think they are.
Okay, that's right. True. It's like having a bad toothache. The rest of your body is functioning fine, but it's that one bad tooth. It's right. Okay.
Right. Time. Yeah. Yeah. So, Paul, can you tell us a little bit about the book that you wrote? I think this one came out in 2016, and it is, especially what's happening in the world now. It just seems like it's a premonition of some kind. Or at least you could read the tea leaves in some way to see what was coming. Can you tell us a little bit about the book?
Yeah, I had written a kind of a novel, for me, a big novel, 13 or so years, 14 years before. And I didn't think I was ever going to write one again, because writing a novel is hard. And I didn't think I would ever do it again. And then about 2013 or so, 11, 12, 13, I imagined that it was like feeling what you're pregnant must be like. All of a sudden, you've got this thing in you, and it's got to come out. And I just did, and I worked on it, and I made an outline, and then when I started to write it, it went somewhere else from the outline, and ended up far better, I thought. And it really has two sections. It has the world kind of bifurcating, kind of splitting into the mega control, Facebook, Twitter, artificial intelligence, government resetting with a new kind of monetary system, that's kind of like central bank digital currency, merged with Visa or whatever, and a new kind of economic model that approaches it's universal basic income with all the little caveats that'll be thrown in there with it. And I followed that pattern where it naturally led. And then I followed the other pattern. These are people who are thrown back in time, let's say technologically 50 years, but they're free and they can do what they want. And there's nobody really forcing them to do anything. And then they come around this way and they take off. And so I just followed that model.
And is that what is it the thinking around the book that got you really into thinking that you should devote more of your newsletter work to the parallel society idea? Because that's obviously where I first saw it.
Right. It was that. There was really that, but there was also the practical matter that Freeman's Perspective, my newsletter, was always I had impossibly high standards. I wanted every issue to be something important, something interesting, and something nobody had ever written about before. Now,
worse than that, you practically gave it away. I mean, instead of charging a lot of money for a very good product.
Still, in fact, everybody should. I'm telling you, it's $99 a year. You should go to Paul's site and sign up for his newsletter. You're a fool if you have $99 and you don't do this, because the wisdom there is profound. So just go to freemansperspective.com. It's $99 a year. It's a no-brainer. Everyone should do it.
I agree.
Thank you. So it was, I had the problem of how do I sustain this? And I had a lot of notes, put together over a lot of years, but, they're not infinite. And I also realized that I was going to have to branch off a little bit and do things different. So what I do now is I do 1 month, the parallel society model, which is what do we actually do? And the other one is Freeman's Perspective, where I can go into all of the fascinating things that have been left by the side of the road. So I usually go 1 month, and that seems sustainable to me.
So parallel society part is about what we actually do. So maybe you could talk about what you think we're dealing with, like what is really happening in the world right now, and what can one reasonably do today, and what to meet the future in a positive way.
Sure. What we're looking at right now is a bunch of large overblown systems that are reaching the end of their road. Since 1971, for sure, the system has functioned on a magic trick. You're making free money, and it won't matter. We can just keep making free money forever. Government has seemed omnipotent during these years. They can do whatever they want because, hey, start a new program. Okay, flip, just a few pecs on a computer, and all of a sudden here's $5 billion. Oh, okay, cool. And people still respond to dollars. In other words, they just create motivation with a strike on a keyboard. They're creating motivation because people will work for those dollars that they made for nothing with hitting an enter key on a keyboard. I mean, it's the greatest gig in the universe if you're amoral. So they have done this, and it's reaching its terminus. So they're looking for other things. That's why the Davos crowd, and especially in the European side, is going for a great reset. Well, you don't need a reset if your system is wonderful.
Right.
So they're going for this, and they're trying to salvage it, and they're going to use fear, they're going to use uncertainty, they're going to use confusion, They're going to use their friends in the press, and they're going to try everything they can to keep this thing going. But it's doomed. No, we all wonder. We all wish we knew when it was doomed. But it's not a sustainable model. And like I say, it's built upon human weakness. People who are confident, people who are happy and confident and believe in themselves and believe in their families, and you can't rule these people. It's very hard to get them to do anything. Governments thrive on people being confused, on people being afraid, those sorts of things.
Isolated.
And
as isolated as possible, as atomized as possible.
Yes, and as atomized as possible. And they monopolize to themselves compassion. They monopolize to themselves the dissemination of information, so we're facing the end of a model, and they're fighting to maintain it, which is ugly as hell.
So
At the same time,
sorry, is the root of it just this financial element? With the financial system and the monetary system, is that the root in your mind, or are there other pieces of these behemoth institutions that are really driving the collapse?
well, the thing is that right now they're all connected. Look at science, big science rather than science proper. Big science has been captured by governments. Almost every penny of grant money for scientific projects comes somehow through a government. They've monopolized it. Academia has sold their collective soul to the state. There's a few exceptions, and God bless them. But for the most part, academia has just sold out. I mean, the idea that scientific papers would be excluded from everybody outside a little club is evil. I mean, the guys in 1680 who were the guys who took the real risks to create the Enlightenment, they would be spitting and fuming and throwing knives. That you can't have scientific papers. The people can't have scientific papers until they get the magic degree that costs $100,000. The magic piece of paper. What the hell? Yeah. So the whole model has been overcome this way. But the good news is that the new model is forming already. And people, we always have the new model, because the new model is essentially the same as the model of a healthy family. And, Tolstoy had this great line. He says, all happy families are alike. All unhappy families are alike and are all different in their own way. But happy families live by a decentralization model where each member of the family matters, where each member of the family is allowed to be themselves and is allowed to contribute and is given a little bit of leeway in life and is helped. This is the model of a successful Little League. It's the model of a successful church picnic. It's a model of any sort of ad hoc thing we do. And it is the opposite of the mega government's model, which again is do what we say or we'll hurt you. So we have this model, and now, my God, we've got it in money. And we also had it in gold and silver. My complaint with the gold and silver crowd is that they don't use their money. They put it on a shelf and leave it there.
Like Doug says, he's bought this gold and silver his whole life, and he's never sold one. Right, Doug?
Yeah, it's true. Right. Yeah. I love gold and silver, but I wish people would actually use them. But Bitcoin and crypto is used every day. So it has its own independent infrastructure, its own pricing infrastructure and everything else. My God, this is the new world taking root.
What do you think happened, Paul, when, I was looking at something where China during the next Olympics, 100% of all purchases of whatever description will be made using your smartphone. I was asking myself, well, how would you get together with a bunch of guys for a friendly poker game if you don't have, how does that work? I mean, there are a lot of instances like that. If you don't have actual money, you can only use government digits.
It's getting to be a problem. It's
Yeah.
getting to be a real problem. Now there's always ways around it, but are they easy or are they hard? And if they're hard, what I mean, for your poker game, you could use chips and then cash out at the end of the night. It's
That's kind of hard, and it almost makes
yeah.
your winnings among your friends, but not your losses, a taxable event that you have to tell somebody about.
Right. If you use their currency, if you use like Monero or Bitcoin, well, it's not a taxable. Technically it's a taxable event. I really don't think the guys at the local poker game are going to report it. But if you got the Chinese digital currency, then they see everything.
Right.
That's what they want.
And that's what's coming here.
Well, that's what they would like. I don't think they're going to get it. I hope I'm not wrong, but I don't think they're going to get it. Not in the U.S., not in Southern Europe. I don't think they're going to be able to get it. They want to. They'll threaten. They'll put a few heads on pikes in front of the palace. I still don't think they're going to get it. I sure hope I'm right. But we've got cryptocurrency. I mean, we got Bitcoin. You can use Bitcoin anonymously if you know how to do it. It's not even very hard, but you just have to do it. Or there's coin mixers, and you can mix your Bitcoins with other people's and come out with Bitcoins that have no trace of where they've been. And there's Monero and Zcash and others that are anonymous, really anonymous transactions. And this is being used every single day. So this is the model. And the great thing about Bitcoin is it is, as we used to say, or as they used to tell us in the old days, it's a gateway drug. And that meant that, don't smoke any of that marijuana, because if you do, pretty soon you're going to be on heroin. And which wasn't true, but Bitcoin really is a gateway drug, because people come because, oh my God, the price is going up, right? I mean, what's not to like? And people come in and they start getting involved. And then after a year or two, you can see the change in them. And they realize that decentralization is really possible, that it can really work, and that it's a completely different world model, and that it works. Oh my God, things are actually possible. This is the thing that's really important. All those minds.
I think so too. And even just the concept of sound money would never normally enter people's heads because of the popularity driven by the price increases in Bitcoin. It's drawing people to it. And Doug's said before, I've heard Doug say that he thought that gold and Bitcoin do not conflict at all, and in fact that he thinks that Bitcoin is a gateway for gold. Actually, that people, as they learn about sound money and they learn about real things and having control over their assets, that they look to other things beyond that, including gold and silver.
Gold and silver are cool. There's nothing, they're good. My only complaint, like I say, with gold and silver, people that are stackers, as we used to call them, my only complaint is that they don't use them. I think they should, pull it off the shelf and start buying and selling. Why not? And if you do that, then you develop a separate pricing infrastructure that's not susceptible to manipulation, to whatever, and you get more people involved. I mean, you guys know this, the first feeling of the very first time you held a gold coin in your hand.
Nothing like it.
That's a special feeling. And you hold that coin in your hand and go, I get it. This is cool. Well, when you're actually, yeah, when you get it going in an economy, all of a sudden thousands of people are having that little moment instead of just a couple.
Got it. So let's back up a little bit though, and tell me more about what you think is coming. So these big systems, the dollar system, our financial system is in real dire straits at this point. There's and they're going to maybe try and keep it going a little longer by printing more money, by keeping interest rates low, by maybe a great reset of some kind, maybe rolling out a central bank digital currency to try and keep it afloat. But what does it look like 24 months from now, 5 years from now? What do you think?
Hmm. I think they're going to try. I don't think they'll be able to get a central bank digital currency in the United States. China, I don't know well enough to really say. In the US, I don't think they're going to be able to get it for a variety of reasons. And I think they're going to have to go for, just out of desperation, they're going to have to try to move towards a universal basic income, negative interest rates, and they won't go quite for a ban on cash, but they'll do it the backdoor way. So there'll be a tax on taking money out of the ATM. There'll be a tax on withdrawing cash above a certain amount at first, I'm sure, out of your bank. Because, well, why? Because money launderers, because child pornography.
Why do you need
because, right, because terrorists, whatever works.
Yeah.
They'll just, it's fear. It will be just total fear from end to end. And I think they're going to go for that. And I think the way it's looking right now is that they're going to have a lot less than perfect compliance. I hope they don't try to go take everybody's guns in the US, because if they do, there will be bloodshed. And if they keep pushing it, and if they, God only knows what happens, because Joe Biden he's senile.
Yeah.
And his, this Miss Harris following him, there's really no nice way to describe this woman. And so I don't think they're going to be able to pull it off. I fear they'll try. And at some point, there may be several US states that say, screw you, we're out.
How do you imagine, though, that somewhat like the way that people have had to adjust their lives quite a bit in the last year to all COVID hysteria? How do you imagine people's lives are different, assuming that they don't fork off and work on the parallel society stuff, but they're on the mainline culture track. They stay on that track. How are their lives different in 2 to 3 years than they are today?
I'm guessing that there's also going to be a split. Now, here in North America, it's just about to get warm. And for starters, they're not going to be able to keep the young guys inside.
No.
They're just not. Sorry, ain't happening. The 15, 25-year-old contingent, they're not going to be so quick to obey. Some of them will, but I don't think that's really going to happen. And I think they're going to start being splits where people are going to say, you know what, this is just screwy. This is wrong. And they're going to just start breaking the rules. And then the government has a choice. They can either try to put a few heads on pikes, that is, send SWAT teams to arrest people for not wearing a mask, in the park, or let it go and back up and say, oh, we solved it. The vaccine is here. We've got it. We're done. We beat this thing. Thank you for helping us, my dear subjects. I think it's going to come to that but there will still, remember, you guys remember the old Japanese holdouts after World War II? There were these guys who lived in caves in some tiny little island somewhere for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And then finally, wandered out when they were 80 years old. I think there's going to be COVID holdouts. I think there's going to be people that are living with their mask and living inside their house and not answering the doorbell for a while, which is sad. And if at all possible, we need a way to help these people get over the transition, because no one likes admitting that they were a sucker.
Right.
And so those of us who haven't done that, we can't say, I told you so. Remember that, everybody. No saying, I told you so, because it doesn't help. Say it at home, scream it at the walls, but don't say it to the guy who's just inching towards, returning to normal, because it doesn't help.
One of the things I was thinking and I'm maybe more conspiratorial minded than both of you guys, but I think part of the push toward getting lots of people vaccinated very, very quickly, whether is that the psychological effect of having been vaccinated, that will have on people's decision-making going forward. So I believe it seems obvious that they're rolling out these, let's call it vaccine passport, isn't even accurate because that implies international borders and stuff, but something that's more akin to a green pass, something that tells you when you can enter certain establishments or leave certain establishments or cross borders or whatever. I think the part of the reason why before these 15 to 25-year-olds this summer call bullshit on this, and you kind of have to deal with the fact that Florida has been okay, but more broadly across the US, when you have to deal with that because it's, these people are kind of breaking the matrix with it, just by not staying home. If they get them vaccinated first, enough people vaccinated, that's the justification for it. And there's a reason to basically suppress or exclude anyone who has not done that. And then now you have the framework, you have the operating system essentially to really control and track movements of people in a way we never had before. That's
well, I think they would like to do that. I can tell you that there are a lot of people that they're just been shutting up for the last couple of months. But I know a particular small business that I deal with from time to time, and they're adamant about, we're not shutting down again. They can come arrest me. I don't give a damn. We're not doing it anymore. This is bullshit. We're not doing it. Don't wear a mask in our business. And if you're sick, stay home, but you're not. Nobody's sick anymore with this thing. Almost. I mean, the numbers have gone way down, which is what viruses do. And there are a lot of people who have been very quiet, but have already called bullshit on it, but don't want to go public because they're afraid that, the SWAT team will descend upon them.
Yeah. And there's no value in going public with it. Just, you can
not at the moment,
yeah.
but there are a lot of people that have already made this decision. And one of the great saving graces of big government is that big government is woefully inefficient and tends to shoot itself in the foot a lot. And these people that I'm talking about, like this one business I frequent, they're very up to date on how many people have become sick after taking the vaccine.
Yeah.
And how many people, how cases have gone up since the vaccine began. And sometimes, humans are notorious for, going from this side of the road to that side of the road and avoiding the middle. So sometimes you get things like that, but, so what? That's life. But they are very much not in favor of the status quo. And whatever comes out of Washington, D.C. is held to be 90% wrong at the go. And so I don't think they're going to be able to pull it off that way. I sure hope so.
Well, isn't the basis of creating a parallel society start with essentially opting out, like just choosing not to comply with certain things, and then building your own infrastructure is the way I understand it. Can you kind of explain more about the practical aspects of building a parallel society and what you're doing to do that?
Sure. There's all sorts of ways. Let's take with Bitcoin, which is a big start. Start doing business in cryptocurrency. People have been doing it since the beginning. Right now, Bitcoin is turning into a store of value and a reserve currency, and Bitcoin can't by itself scale to millions of transactions, per minute. It just can't. But there's all sorts of add-ons. There's the Lightning layer, which adds security, adds privacy, and allows for instant, almost free transactions. And it works really well, and it's cryptographically secure. And it's a terrific thing. And then there's other currencies. Bitcoin Cash is a good currency for buying coffee. Litecoin is a great currency for buying coffee, and you can exchange between them easy and getting easier all the time. So we have these type of systems that are in place, and you can conduct a whole lot of business with these currencies. It's actually easier in many cases than using dollars, even in the West. I mean, what if you do business with somebody, you're American, and you do business with somebody who's in Europe, or God forbid, Russia or Brazil or somewhere.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's it's not impossible, but it's just so difficult as to be impractical. With Bitcoin, I can go bip, 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 Johnny's paid. Bip, bip, bip. Oh, here's some money from Billy. Okay, let's go. And that's it.
So what do? Do you
So
start the places the local businesses that you frequent? Do you just start asking them if they'll accept it instead? And just trying to be a little bit of an evangelist for it, so that you can use that means. Is that part of the idea?
That's part of the idea. But the thing we have to remember when we do those things, and we should be doing those things all the time. The important thing to remember is that it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And the guy at the local store isn't gonna get it the first time. And that's okay. We all change our mind in our own ways. And sometimes we're really slow. And sometimes we're really slow to pick up something. You know, you see something, go, oh, geez, why didn't I see that 5 years ago? Well, that's just the way we work. So it is. So we need to do that. And there's all sorts of ways to break out of the status quo and do it differently. Homeschooling, I'm an advocate for homeschooling, have been forever. I think that's a wonderful model. Start thinking for yourself. It's fun. And there's all sorts of ways to do things that get away from them. Look at the Italians and the Greeks, the Southern Europeans. They've gotten around the system creatively for, hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, in Italy, if you get to know people a little bit, you can buy anything with cash under the table. You got to get to know people a little bit. I was in the house of an old Italian couple. I don't know, 5-10 years ago, and out in the hills. And we're talking about something, politics came up, and the lady of the house said, il Stato. And it was a beautiful moment. And that's the way people are. And they've been doing parallel society on various levels forever.
Doug, I know you have to run in not too long. So I just want to make sure questions you have for Paul.
Actually, my appointment downtown in Punta has been canceled because they had to see somebody in a hospital. Anyway, I'm cool time-wise.
Okay, good. So what about the things that I worry about? Because I worry about these things that are, where you're deeply integrated in the system. Of course, being deeply integrated in the monetary system is, getting, I guess, separated from that as part of parallel society stuff. But what about other things like, food systems and, all these things we really do rely on these monolith systems for everything today. From our basic needs of electricity to water and to money. It's all through these monolith systems. And how do you start changing that without basically just running off and living like a hermit in the mountains?
Right. It's right now it's a problem because centralized power controls a lot of these things. We should start by remembering that the people who actually produce are our friends. They're like us. They produce real things. They make, deliver, repair real things. The farmer is like us. He's not like the yahoos in the big marble buildings on the hills. They're like us. They're producing real things. So there is a particular set of ethics that follow productive people. And it's not, it's not absolute, and it's not ever written down anywhere. But there's certain sort of ethics that follow productive people, and they are us. The guy who repairs your car, the guy who builds whatever, they're like us. The truck driver who delivers everything, the guy who, the train mechanic who fixes, the diesel engines of the trains. These are us. These are our guys. They don't belong to the state. Now the state orders them around and threatens them just like everyone else, but they're fundamentally us. So there's a great, I'll pass on the great quote from Bucky Fuller. But when things break down, they get better for us. They get better for the farmer. They get better for the truck driver. They get better for the repairman. It's always scary when things break down, and there will be, I'm sure, moments of dislocations and everything else, but they're primarily going to be caused by the system using violence against people who don't obey. But the mechanic wants your money, whether it's dollars or Bitcoin or silver or whatever. The mechanic wants your money. The farmer wants your money. He's going to find a way to make you pay. In the book, in the Breaking Dawn, I illustrated a lot of that. When people ran out of things that at the end of the line, they had so much, they were using a mixture of cryptocurrency and silver usually, and in other things. And finally, when they ran out and they didn't have anything else, they wrote IOUs, and they just used their old checks from the bank to write an IOU. And those things, people go, oh my God, they'll cheat. Yeah, but they'll cheat one time and no one will do business with them again. You find out when the responsibility comes back to the neighborhood, to the town, people handle it really well. I mean, there's always a few schmucks, but that's universal. In the present system, they're empowered. So people will go to using IOUs if they have to. And the IOUs will be good. Otherwise, you won't be able to do business a second time. And everybody needs to do continuing business with the farmer. So I don't think it's going to be a particular problem, although, I'm sure there will be stories on the news about starving grandmas eating cat food again.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, so you talk about there being likely major dislocations with these gigantic systems as they fall apart or whatever. How does one best position themselves to be able to endure those and come out in a way that maybe is even in a better way than you went into it? And is it like, I know a lot of people that always imagined that they would, for instance, have a bolt hole in Buenos Aires, and they would just go there and, to avoid things if things went bad in the United States, or, just to escape to a mountain house or whatever. But at the end of the day, we need community and resources. We need an economy to function, to be able to give us the goods and services that we actually require. So we need to be engaged with others in some way. So how do you best position yourself, in your opinion?
Well, I think for most people, it is a return to family and neighborhood. Who do you run to? Who do you go to? If things really go bad and you're really in trouble and you need outside help, you go to your family, you go to your close friends, you go to your neighbors. And I think people are going to revert more or less to that. And I don't think it will really be that much of a problem, because, we think of large systems collapsing and we go, oh my God, if we imagine Mad Max or all of these other really, really bad scenarios. Humans have been trained and are really good at imagining disaster. But look just 30 years ago at the fall of the Soviet Union. This mighty, monstrous empire, which really was evil and had thousands of nukes, fell almost without a shot. I mean, about 1,000 people died in Romania, and a few scattered others, which is, terrible if you happen to be that, it happens to be your family member. But considering the scope of the Soviet Union, it broke up with hardly a shot. And so it's interesting that is not only a very large example, it's also the most recent example. And it's one of the few examples we have of a modern-ish sort of thing, empire collapsing. And I think it's kind of promising. Now, the Soviet sphere, as we say, it has still have its problems. But my God, you go to Eastern Europe over the last 20 years, so much better than it was, and cool people, and forward-thinking people. So I think I kind of take a lot of heart from the Soviet Union breakup, because everybody kept eating, everything kept going, electricity, with a few outages here and there, kept going, because the guys who run generators want to give you electricity. They want you to do it. Your electric power lines are down. There's 15 guys in the next within 20 miles of you who know how to do that and really want your money for putting wires in. So, I think we're going to be okay.
So Doug, we were asking a couple of days ago for a counter to our Doomcast, and I think Paul's given us a pretty good one here. What are your
a great job and very realistic job besides. And that Soviet example that you brought up, Paul, is actually most encouraging because they were indoctrinated from cradle to grave. I mean, thoroughly and heavily indoctrinated. And today, it's said correctly, I think, that there are more communists in American universities than there are in all of Russia. So
it's probably true.
Yeah, so things can get better, but it is rather amazing. So that's genuine cause for optimism, actually. But I think things are going to get much worse here in the U.S. before they get better. It took 70 years for things to get better in Russia.
It did. I'm hoping it's going to go faster because of the speed at which ideas get around. Like, let's take, for example, here's another one of my optimistic scenarios. Back in the 1990s, there were so few people who really understood the concept of living by the golden rule and that government was a beast. And it wasn't just wrong because the wrong people were in power, but the whole model was wrong. I mean, you just couldn't find people like this. There were a few overly educated people from the East Coast, a smattering from the Midwest, and a couple on the West Coast who really understood it. And Roger, the farmer from Iowa, if you remember. But there just weren't that many. And now there are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions who would basically agree with those statements. I think that is having an impact. And I think it's going to continue having an impact.
I mean, the part about people waking up, I definitely think is definitely happening, and people not just getting out of their basic left-right tribalism, default. It's the problem is that my guy isn't in charge. That thinking. I think people are somewhat realizing how wrong that thinking is. But I tend to agree with Doug where I see things getting worse before they get better because I haven't seen many of these individual rebellious acts. I mean, for the most part, what you see is you just see people kind of, just blindly complying, because, and I think I understand why people want to do the right thing. I think fundamentally, most people, they want to do the right thing.
Most people.
And then they want things to go back to normal. They want to have a life again. They want things to continue. So I think you get this voluntary compliance from people, but I don't know. I just haven't seen many signs yet that it's going to stop. And I just think this push for these vaccine passports, it really is, which we've been talking about, Doug, for at least 6 months now, is terrifying to me because I think that is this, real serious control grid where you can control the movements of people. Of course, it requires voluntary compliance, but it seems like we keep giving the government that.
Well, listen, there are certainly major risks, and this is a particularly nuts moment, and there's a lot of risks involved. I don't know, maybe I'm just optimistic, but I do see a lot of people in my daily stuff. I mean, I don't get out that much. I'm usually here in my office writing, but I make a point of getting out and going places, and I see a lot of people who are going along at the absolute minimum that they can without getting a boot on their throat, and think that the whole thing is sick.
Okay, so thinking about the future and thinking about a more decentralized society, or where these monolith structures are not really dominating things, what are the skills that would be, if someone today, maybe you have lots of extra free time because you're locked in your home for the most part, is what skills should, especially younger people, people under 30, what should they be trying to do to make themselves more prepared for this future that's coming?
One thing that they can do is to learn some sort of actual valuable skill. It could be growing crops. It could be learning how to weld, learning how to do electrical wiring, learning how to be a carpenter, learning how to, drive a large machine, going to work with your uncle, building natural gas containers or something. Doesn't matter, anything. Some actual valuable skill, rather than deciding that you're going to be a public policy advisor. Screw that. That's ridiculous. They have 500 times more policy advisors than they need in the best of circumstances. And, just forget it. Learn how to do something that has actual practical, real value. And then start learning about Bitcoin, start learning about silver and gold, start learning some economics, start learning how to teach, or start holding some lectures. Just teach your neighbors how to use encryption. Teach things like this. These are things that actually matter, that have actual value in the world, rather than appropriated power, where I'm going to be the boss and, you're going to listen to me and do what I say, and you're going to give me your money.
This is a concept you talked about in your most recent newsletter. You talked about direct power and appropriated power. Since you mentioned it, can you explain what that is for people?
Yeah, direct power is what we're talking about, the actual power to expand and contribute to human life. Food, good machines, things that we need, heating systems, lighting systems, cars, whatever, things that we actually need for real life. And those are the things that matter. I like to use this example to divide between what I call direct power and appropriated power. And there's some number of quite a few million truck drivers in the United States. Let's say it's 10 million, just for a round number. What if these guys finally got disgusted and said, you know what, we're sick of Washington, D.C. These guys take half our money from us by force or threat, and then they call us white supremacists, they call us evil, and they're now teaching children in schools that they direct or control, that we're evil because of our skin color. Screw you. We're not making any more deliveries inside the Beltway. And we're going to create a little benevolent fund for the few hundred truck drivers who can't afford to turn down the rides and are getting economically hurt. We'll have a benevolent fund for them, and screw DC. Immediately, the difference between direct power and appropriated power would become obvious. The truckers have real power. They have real direct power because they are delivering the goods that are necessary for life. Whereas the yahoos up on the hill in DC, all they got is the power that they can skim away from other people by fear or by deception. And that's all they got. It would immediately become clear who has real power and who doesn't.
Is the Capitol still surrounded by barbed wire and National Guardsmen?
I think it is.
It is.
Yeah, you don't hear about this very much, but I think it is too. I've heard that it's supposed to be there at least until June. I mean, this is.
If I had time, I think I would get in a car and drive over just so I see it with my own eyes. But I think it's still there. Yeah.
That's absolutely shocking. I mean, talk about something that's crazy and unnecessary, and
it's unbelievable.
He's reacting to it or talking about it. I've heard that it's true, but I haven't seen anything on the media or.
Well, things even on talk radio are suppressed. Even right-wing talk radio in the United States. If you talk about the election being stolen in any way, you're off the air. And this is Republican talk radio. Yikes. I mean, whatever your opinion is, that the guy can't even have an opinion? Whoa.
Well, is that true if you talk about the COVID hysteria and the vaccines and all that as well?
That's a good question. I think that it's more soft power, but when you're talking about media, And, you know, I don't know how many companies there are that own all the radio stations, 5, 10, whatever. And they all got loans from major banks, and the major banks will put the pressure on them. Yeah, we're going to call your loan if you keep doing this stuff because we think it's, you know, they're going to comply also. And I think it's more of that kind of thing going on with the COVID stuff.
What do you think the chances are that the social credit system, which is being used widely now in China, will be used here? So you can be dinged.
Well, there's I think two different things about it. One, it already is via Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and a few others. Those things are so much worse than people know they are. That's already going on. Plenty of people have lost their job because of Facebook posts and Twitter posts, and many, many more haven't got a job that they wanted because people looked at their Twitter record or bought data about them from Twitter or whomever. The other side is the real full-blown Chinese in your face version. I don't know. It's possible. That's the one thing that scares me is what we call big data. Most people call it AI. It's a particular way of crunching giant numbers. Big data combined with universal surveillance is truly frightening.
Vaccine passports are the gateway for that control mechanism over people, though. You know that it's
as has been.
You verify a specific identity with your phone, you know, which is tracking you everywhere, and private businesses agreeing that the right thing to do, just to stay open, perhaps, is to, you know, only let people in who have a green check mark versus people who don't. And it verified by your biometric stuff, your face scan or your thumbprint, that it's you. You know, I mean,
yeah,
that's what I worry about. And I think the combination of these things together is the real dystopian stuff, you know, it really is.
It is, and that's it. You remember in the Breaking Dawn, that's one whole side of the thing went right into that, because that truly scares me. That is frightening, and if that happens, then we got a problem.
Well, it's happening all over the world. This is one thing that leads me towards a much more conspiratorial view of things, that this is happening across the entire face of the globe, not just here in the US. It's almost as if it's truly orchestrated. And
Doug, you are the non-conspiracy minded person I know. And so that is shocking.
That's true. I have to believe my eyes. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you can't argue with the facts. It's going on everywhere. And almost certainly, I haven't dug into it deeply enough, but it's almost certain that this was created in essentially a weaponizing viruses lab in Wuhan, China. I mean, I'm not absolutely sure about that, but it looks pretty certain. And I'm going, my God, who does gain of function work with dangerous viruses? But this Fauci guy,
NIH and Fauci and a Chinese.
Yeah, they put millions of dollars into and it's called gain of function. My God, who does that? Why would you do that? So, you know, there is an argument to be made that a lot of it was on purpose. You know, people are notoriously followers, and politicians are, you know, like, you know, oh, there's a parade. Show me where the parade's going so I can get in front and lead it. But you can make a really good case that there was premeditation here, or at least in parts of it, and it's a good case.
Well, considering all the horrible things that have been done throughout history in wars, I wonder if people like Ted Turner, who want to reduce the population of the planet to 500 million, and I think Gates has said 2 billion is the right number. I wonder if these people are actually planning that. I mean,
arrogance of these guys.
It's unbelievable that this guy, Klaus Schwab, actually has said, by 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. How can somebody says that?
This is a Bond. This Schwab guy is a Bond villain. I mean, he really is.
Yes. I mean, reality is imitating science fiction in a lot of ways. And unfortunately, a lot of it's dystopian science fiction. I desperately want to be optimistic, and I can think of a lot of good reasons to be optimistic, but I'm looking at the trend, and you have to admit, Paul, the trend has not been good. Not just for a few years, actually for many years.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of ways to see things going very badly. The only one that I'm really, really concerned with is surveillance combined with big data. The others, I think, are survivable. Surveillance combined with big data is monstrous. It's just monstrous. And that scares me.
Well, you mean the cameras, the presence of cameras absolutely everywhere. They're all being linked. And Siri and Alexa were everywhere now. Yeah.
And the way they process the data, because, we used to say, oh, well, yeah, the NSA's got this stuff, but they can't drink from a fire hose. Big data loves the fire hose. I want 2 fire hoses. I want 4. They love it. And the bigger the fire hose they get, the better. And when you start getting people who are using Facebook and Google and all these others, they're getting custom environments. What you see on YouTube is not what your friend sees. And what they do is they give you this custom environment and they see what makes you tick, how you interact with this custom environment. And it all feeds into the system. And they know how to trigger you. They know how to control you. They know how to do this. I mean, it's not perfect yet, but it's way, way beyond what anybody is comfortable knowing what it is. And this scares me. Now, it's easy to beat it. All we have to do is stop using the damn stuff. Throw away your smartphone, get a little flip phone, stop using Facebook and whatever else, and live. But as long as you're tied into those outfits, it's really dangerous.
It's funny that 30 years ago, kind of when the computer revolution was really getting underway, I thought that that as computers became more important and computer programs there were a lot of libertarians in the computer business. So I thought that, well, a lot of these guys are just acting as lone wolves, going to put all kinds of viruses and backdoors and God knows what in the systems of the IRS and other bad government agencies, but it doesn't seem to have happened. On the contrary, they've all gone to work for Google and Facebook.
I know, it's been tremendously disappointing. I went once to the big hackers convention in Vegas, and a couple years after, they had the NSA recruiting at this place, and I was like, my mind's ready to explode. It's unbelievable. So, and I know what they do because I've talked to some of the guys who went to work for them, and I've raged against this publicly. But 9/11 had a lot to do with it because people were emotionally worked up about that for obvious reasons. And they said, you get to be one of the good guys. We're going to stop those evil monsters who took down buildings in New York City. Well, everyone wants to stop the monsters who take down buildings. I mean, what's not, okay. But they suck these guys in with that. And the Zuckerbergs of the world made a lot of money. The guys who were building encryption engines didn't. And they still had a mouth, they still had a family to feed. So that's the sad side of the whole computer revolution, is how many guys took jobs that they were kind of disgusted with, but took them anyway.
Well, this is one of the things you mentioned in your most recent newsletter. That's a really big opportunity, because whereas people working on encryption stuff, on protocols, on the foundational technology of the internet really didn't make any money. It was only people who made layers on top of that, like Zuckerberg who did. But with Bitcoin, that's changed. And so you have a lot of people that were early into cryptocurrency were in for ideological reasons, libertarians, sound money kind of people, cyberpunks, whatever. And so there's a lot of people that are sitting on huge amounts of gains now. And, you get into that and you say, we may never have had this opportunity ever in history before. We might never have it again, where there's so much wealth sort of accumulated among people with free minds what do we do? And you outline a bunch of different things in your newsletter.
Yeah, I think it's a really important moment for people who've been involved with Bitcoin and the others for a while, because these tend to be outsiders. They tend to be people who really did it because for ideological reasons, so to speak, but for it was something that was free and it was real and you could do. And all of a sudden, these people have needs. Bitcoin's, as we record this, I don't know, it's $59,000 per coin. So you got a guy who by accident got, I don't know, a couple hundred Bitcoins in 2011 or something, when they were, $1 or whatever, a couple dollars or $10. And all of a sudden, this guy's sitting on millions, many millions of dollars. Well, what are you going to do? All of a sudden, we have outsiders with needs. And so I went through the newsletter, some of the things I thought we should do. And I really hope people do, because we need to build a world based upon better principles. And we just need to get started and just doggedly do it.
I like it. Okay. Well, we've been, it's been about an hour and 20 minutes so far. So I probably going to wrap this up. Doug, are there any last questions or comments you have for Paul before I do a final pitch for his newsletter?
Yeah, for sure. One thing, when we brought up 911, Paul, what happened to Building 7? What's your take?
Building 7, I'm as certain as I can be that it was brought down on purpose. I actually had professional involvement with 9/11, in the aftermath. It's a long, involved story, but I was actually walking around in the dirt where Building 7 had been and looking into the hole and everything else. It's a long story, but I had some professional involvement with it. As far as I'm concerned, Building 7 was brought down on purpose. Why? I don't know. Maybe they thought it was going to go down anyway. Maybe, I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe it's because of the FBI vaults in the basement. I don't know. But there was no reason for it to fall. The building that was closest to it really didn't do that much damage to it. It did more damage to the Verizon building next door. So there was no reason that I see that it should have come down. And it was long after the fires were dying out. And I just don't see anything else. I don't see any. I can give you engineering case why Building 1 and 2 came down the way they did. I can't give you an engineering case for why Building 7 came down.
Okay, it's a good answer.
All right. Well, Paul, I want to say thanks again for joining us on the podcast. Your optimistic view it's really helpful. I mean, thinking of what happened post collapse of the Soviet Union, I think it's a really good model to see the way that when everything collapsed and most of the people there were indoctrinated, they still found a way to build something better in the end. And I think that's definitely a good example for us to follow. All of our listeners and viewers, I definitely encourage you to go sign up for Paul's newsletter. It's $99. All you need to increase your price on it, honestly, but it's $99 a year for this newsletter. There's the wisdom there is profound. He offers a lot of ideas about what people can do, in the future that we're going to face. Whether it's optimistic or pessimistic, there are things you could do. And Paul outlines a bunch of them. So please go to Free Man's Perspective and sign up for that.
Thank you.